Okay.
Hi everyone. For the sake of the recording, we've had people logging in and shared the agenda in chat. I just want to start the meeting with highlighting that the LD4 Wikidata Affinity Group is running a series kind of aimed at newer Wikidata participants, particularly with some of the EMCO users in mind. We've had kind of an intro to Wikidata session as part of the LD4 conference, and then last week there was a session on using gadgets and scripts in Wikidata to make your editing a little bit more efficient. And then in the next two sessions, on August 19th and then on September, what is it? I think the 2nd, September 2nd, we will have kind of sessions there about editing person items and editing corporate body items. So if you're interested in brushing up on some skills there, I'm sharing the link to the project series in chat. And so if you or folks at your institution are newer to Wikidata, feel free to check that out too. And many thanks to Kyla Jemison for leading that effort there. Okay, so we have people signing in. Amara has shared the agenda in the chat again. And Mara, thank you for taking notes today. We have a few items to cover. The first is a reminder, if you haven't already, to weigh in on the discussion of for the application profile, and then there has been an ongoing discussion around the country of citizenship property, and Mary has set up an option to vote on where you think the recommended property should stand for our purposes as a community. There's kind of a nuanced discussion, so please read carefully and weigh in the chat. There's a few different threads going there, but we hope to have voting closed by Monday the 18th. So if you can add that to your to-do list before the end of the week, that would be wonderful. I think, are we doing this at the closing it at the end of the day Monday? Is that the plan, Mary?
I didn't quite think through that part, but yeah, we can say end of day on Monday, and then we'll send out an email about voting to approve the map as a whole on Tuesday.
Mhm. Perfect. That would be great. So end of the day Monday to weigh in there on the country of citizenship discussion. And yeah, thank you so much to everybody who's participated in discussions on the talk page for the application profiles. It's been a really lively chat, and I appreciate everybody's time and energies there. Um, so look for further information on voting to kind of codify the application profiles as a whole. But if you have anything else to weigh in, now's the time to do it. Um, Okay, looking at the chat, some more Google Doc permissions chat. But otherwise, I think we're maybe ready to move on to one of our main agenda items, which does spring from the discussion on the talk pages about the application profiles around um, appropriate sources for references. I can link that here just so people have their own point of reference for where this discussion has been. Um, I think the kind of scope of the conversation has been around finding appropriate sources online for personal information about Wikidata items for people that we might be creating. Um, Definitely a lot of concern for privacy and reliability of information, understanding that the internet is a very challenging place and sometimes our personal information gets out there in ways that we don't necessarily condone, and then what is appropriate for us as librarians to be contributing to Wikidata, based on the reliability of the information that we have available to. So there's some conversation and comments around uh, sources that are potentially like data brokers or LLMs. Um, and I think that people have weighed in with comments about different practices at their library in terms of determining appropriate sources for people. Of course, this is kind of a nuanced discussion where there may be concerns for living people that are different for people who um, are not currently alive. I think some of these questions have been, um, or not some of these questions, but some of these issues, rather, um, we can lean on Wikidata policies themselves a bit to um, help us determine what's appropriate for making statements and references in Wikidata. And I think we just kind of have a question that's outstanding around what is a viable way forward to um, develop best practices both for your individual projects as well as for EMCO as a whole. And then I think that it seems like the discussion last night or yesterday evening moved into maybe there's a longer term path to improving these policies in Wikidata in general. Did anybody have any questions or comments about what is useful for us at this time to organize as a community or for your individual projects in terms of sourcing reliable information about people? And feel free to add comments in the chat or raise your hand and um, I can unmute and have a discussion. Give it a couple minutes. I guess maybe we can back up and say, is this a special area of concern for the folks that are here? Um, is this something that you're worried about in terms of um, your Wikidata contributions? Nicolette, did you unmute?
Yeah. Um, I was I was just thinking maybe we should start some kind of a basic list of what we want to put in. We can always edit, change our minds if it gets too long or too big, but I think we need to have a starting point. And uh, based on the discussions, there's some things folks pretty much agree on that are going to be pretty basic that we're going to have to put in. So start with those and then move on from there.
A
Um,
starting point in terms of the types of sources
yeah,
we
well,
want to be referencing?
the type of sources, the type of information we want to put in. Um, the sources should be, to me, they should be reliable and truthful sources. So it's going to be kind of hard to say what sources, because there's so many sources out there. So a lot of it's going to have to be, is this good information or is this, some 2-year-old that wrote it up? You know, we're smart enough to figure that out. So I don't think we need to be real in depth about that part of it. I think we can trust our own judgments in a lot of it. But I would think that there should be some kind of uh, field or something where it is in the record for Wikidata that it's acceptable information to us, the whole record is. You know, I don't know if I'm making any sense or not.
So I think your last, can I clarify that last point within the context of a Wikidata item that you created or enhanced in some
Right.
way, you're thinking that there should be a way, an additional kind of statement to check or be able to query whether
To
the
say
full
like
item is kind of like sourced from valid information?
or yeah, like PCC approved information. I mean, the whole record would be, like we have our authority records. They're all like approved things, and we know where we're getting it from. In Wikidata, everybody can enter. So if we say this is a, a PCC kind of improved, I don't even know if that will work though, because anybody can go in and edit those records too. So, I mean, those are my concerns about that. I,
Yeah, so having
but I'm a
some,
NACO person, so I'm
yeah,
I'm a little wiggy with wiki. So,
that's fair. We're all coming from different angles here.
yeah.
Um, Thank you, Nicolette. Mara, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say to that point, I mean, we are tagging or the idea is, I think, to put the EMCO project tag on the items that are created through the project. And one could, add a timestamp to that as a as a reference or a qualifier, I don't know exactly what it would be, but I'm sure there's a way to add a verified date. But I think also every item will have in its history um, when the PCC tag was added. And so people might be able to surmise that whatever comes after that is not part of the original PCC record. But I guess that doesn't
Oh,
mean that it wasn't added to by a PCC project after
right.
that. So, yeah.
Any other kind of comments? Abby has added a comment in chat. This conversation reminded me of a question I was asked by a colleague. Are the best practices only for original records, or would there be any expectation of applying them to or fixing existing records? That's a good question too, of whether for statements that may exist on an item, whether it's within the scope of EMCO work to kind of go back and verify any statements that may not have references applied to them, which I think a lot of people tend to edit Wikidata without adding references, which can be problematic. Thank you, Abby. Additional thoughts here. I think it's um, a really interesting and thorny question. So if there are ways that we can kind of talk through it and figure out some options to move forward, that would be awesome.
Well, I'll just say out loud real quick rather than type because I was slow typing.
Yeah. Thank you,
Just a
Abby.
general thought that I do think that having guidelines for references is important because, as you mentioned, a lot of people, when they create Wikidata records, don't include them. And anything we can do to make it easier, basically, the less decision making you have to do something, I think makes it easier to do it. So if we want to encourage people to do references at all, I think we need to make it as straightforward as possible. And so having guidelines is better than making it a free for all, I think, in that case.
Thank you. Um, so for the context, I don't think we've had a chance to really um, understand the full scope of the projects that people are working on, and the types of information people are working with the within the scope of the pilot phase. So does that make sense to people for a more kind of centralized approach for the guidelines for reliable references, and then to try to apply them to your individual project? Or do people find that they're already kind of developing a sense of um, what a reliable reference might be for the scope of their information? And then that experience could then be contributed to a more centralized kind of set of best practices.
Would it be obnoxious to say both?
Not obnoxious, but maybe
I mean, in
categorize
this,
some nuance there.
yeah, I mean, in the sense that I think having a sort of top-down thing for starters helps a lot of people to save them the time to come up with something. But I also think that for those people who have taken the extra step to create their own guidelines, contributing that back to the central repository and keeping track of that would also help that. So I think, does that make sense in the way I'm saying kind of like both? Like in some cases, I think people have already have pre-existing. I know for us, a lot of the projects we do are kind of in the areas where people have subject expertise. And so just through long experience, they have these ideas about what are reliable references or not, whether they've written it down or not, right? Um, and so those pre-existing understandings are there. But in every case, the less reinventing the wheel you have to do, the better. So, um, yeah, having that kind of top down, I would like there to be a top down, even if we allow for people to do some things on their own, because it just makes things easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear you. And I think Nicole, are you raising, or Nicolette, are you raising your hand?
No, I was just agreeing. I think that's
Okay.
a good idea. You know, it makes good sense to me to have something like that, so people have a place to start.
Okay.
You know, and then we can always add and do whatever we need with it.
So definitely, it sounds like we have a couple of people weighing in for a two-pronged approach, where we have some guidelines to help get us started, um, and maybe a plan over time to incorporate some wisdom achieved or through individual projects, and build that out over time. Mara has added in the chat, just for our current baseline, in the list of core properties in the project page, there is a reference required column. There's also the following statement: references are recommended for all statements. Statements listed below as required are only instances. One second. Okay, sorry, my internet was jiggly. Statements listed below as required are only instances when the lack of a reference will raise an error flag. Please read the verifiability and the help sources for more information regarding reliable sources. So yeah, I think there is a question of, as a group, what additional um, organization would be valuable? And we can kind of build something out on the project page. and call that out as its own section or its own tab. Um, any thoughts there? I mean, to Nicolette's point, I think people are smart and they can, evaluate sources as appropriately. But if we want to implement something for people who are newer to Wikidata to kind of reduce the load of getting into this and help establish stronger community guidelines, what kind of structure would be helpful at this point?
I think in our documentation, we should put these resources that are in Wikidata because I can get so lost in Wikidata that where do I go? Where do I go? Where am I going? Where have I been? What am I doing? So if we could put in our documentation where folks in Wiki could find this information, then that would be not, we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel on a lot of it. So I think that would be helpful to put in.
Mhm. So I think there's maybe some structure we can think about for um, our project page, um, and calling out the source reliability questions and collating some of these resources. But then we have a longer term discussion about um, more kind of nuanced guidelines and best practices for different kinds of information or projects that people might be working on as the community develops that way.
One side thought I had, it just occurred to me, and I apologize if this has already been discussed and I missed it, but that I know sometimes we like to cite books rather than online resources. That's the
Mhm.
kind of the best site. And I know that currently we're not working on best practices for adding titles. Um, and so when you cite a book, there's this desire to like have something you can point to in Wikidata. So creating a record for the title of the for the work essentially. But that we don't have guidelines for that. So um, that's really more of an observation. I don't know what we would do about that currently, but that is kind of a bit of a roadblock, I guess, because if you want to cite a book, it's not super easy, straightforward as it is for citing an online resource, and so there's kind of a barrier there.
Yeah, I agree that citing a book can be really odd and unnecessarily complicated in Wikidata. But I would like to point out that in the help sources document page, which we've shared, there is a whole section on referencing books,
Yes, and that
if
we've
that's
been
helpful.
using that documentation. It's been very useful. It's
Okay.
just thinking of ways that I don't know if there's anything additional we could add about that in lieu of having best practices for adding titles ourselves, you know.
Yeah, and I think the scope of our current pilot is primarily around persons and corporate bodies, and that works will be coming farther down the line. So maybe that's something to um, keep in mind as the community progresses. I think um, what I'm hearing is that it'd be helpful to have some of the policy information repackaged a little bit and a little bit more accessible. But for the most part, we can kind of um, rely on some of the Wikidata policy statements and our own best judgment, and then kind of keep the conversation around source reliability going so that if there is something that we need to build out in a more robust framework, we can do that further down the line. Are there any other comments around the source reliability question? There's a lot of obviously bad information on the internet. And I think that is a really interesting comment about wanting to source information from books and some of the tricky guidelines there. But um, oh, and thank you, Sarah Adams, for sharing the link to a past LD4 Wikidata affinity group working hour. Um, that will hopefully be relevant reference for folks there looking for good examples. 2022, an oldie but a goodie. Thank you.
Yeah, that's before my time, so thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. Okay, so I think if we don't have any further comments around source reliability at this time, um, I think um, we had there was some discussion in the meeting yesterday about whether people are creating project pages for their EMCO projects. We do have um, a tab created on our project page for listing out your projects and kind of calling attention and linking over to your own project page if you're creating that. Um, but I think as registry coordinators, we're going to meet and discuss that next week if there's additional help or guidelines that we can provide. Has everybody been creating project pages, or are you still in the project process of creating your projects, or where do people kind of stand on that? So Northwestern is more generally integrated, so they don't have their own kind of project page per se. That's nice to hear that someone has, or your library has integrated Wikidata into regular workflows. Texas A&M is still in the process of creating their projects for EMCO. Thank you, Jeanette. Um, is there anything that we can organize or do to help you kind of work through your project cleaning or project page creation or things like that as we're moving forward through the timeline with the pilot? Jeanette, did you unmute?
Yeah, maybe there's since it's been a while since we've last at Texas A&M, since we've last worked in Wikidata, maybe a refresher on how to create a project page.
Mm. Yeah, they're not the most intuitive, the wiki page editing. So I think there were some sessions that the Wikidata Affinity Group did a long time ago, but maybe we can surface some of that information and do a working hour or something like that sometime to um,
Yeah, that would be
make that
helpful,
accessible.
or maybe just a demo at our next meeting or something like that.
Yeah, sure. So a bit of a call for help there. Some comments. USC is working on mapping what they want in their records. At NYPL, they're likely going to just incorporate EMCO information on their existing page. I think that sounds very practical. Um, it sounds like there's a lot of planning going on or and kind of getting organized. I'm sure it's been a busy summer for everybody. Um, Anything else to discuss today? We're a little bit ahead of the full hour, but any other questions or concerns at this time? Yes, Amy asked in the chat, will we be voting on the application profile as a whole in the future? And yes, I think the country of citizenship um, will be voting will close Monday, and then after that, we'll announce open voting for that. Yeah, thank you, Mary in chat. We'll announce open voting for the application profiles as a whole, so we can have that stamp of consensus, which will be very exciting after so much discussion. Anything else? I'm happy to give folks back a little bit of time. I'm not seeing anything come in or anyone jumping to unmute themselves, but please do come to the upcoming Wikidata Affinity Group sessions for editing persons and corporate bodies. Watch out for announcements about the metadata application profile approval voting. Um, and you will soon hear from the registry coordinators, myself, Mara, Mary Campany, Kyla Jemison, and Sasha Frizzell about next steps. We're really excited to have everybody participating here and really appreciate the community-driven approach to organizing these projects and developing EMCO kind of from the ground up. So it's really exciting to have you all here. Um, Please weigh in, continue to weigh in on the discussion pages, and we'll be in touch with next steps and announcements. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. We'll be in touch soon.